kind of evolution of the company from its earlier phase to what it became after that. And that, I cut my teeth and did a lot of deals, learned a lot about M&A, learned a lot about company financing, and continued to learn about leadership, all of which were very helpful and, lessons that I draw on even today in my current role, which is very, very different.
Is there one moment or one item that you would select out and say, look, this was probably most pivotal in my career? Just curious if there's one moment that you could tie to, hey, look, this is probably the biggest intersection that I ever faced, and luckily I chose the road that I decided to go down.
It's very hard to say that there was one of those moments. I think you get to a certain point, and I've been doing this for a while. There's probably a lot of those moments. And luckily for me, and maybe a little bit more than half, I chose the right fork. I chose the right road. But I think your career is made of sometimes the experiences you learn when you actually take the wrong one, right? Or when you take the road less traveled. I go back early in my career, when I was in, one of my first early marketing jobs as a sort of a product manager, early marketing role, where back then everyone wanted to be on one of the big teams, one of the big name brand teams with 30 product managers and hundreds of millions of dollars of marketing budget, and I had the benefit of learning the trade on some of those teams. But after a few years, I had the opportunity to join and actually lead a much smaller team on a set of products that were not exactly the name brand products. They weren't the ones mentioned by the CEO at the earnings release. And boy, am I ever happy I did that, because that's where you really learn, right? You don't have all of the resources that you might need. You have to learn to kind of influence others throughout the organization that you have no direct authority over. You have to kind of bring them along to your way of thinking and align them to your objectives. And I learned a lot there. And that again, those are lessons, they're lessons in all of those experiences, but those are lessons that stick with me today.
Yeah, what that reminds me of is I remember very distinctly a product manager in General Electric, and we had a lot of different products in General Electric healthcare. And one particular manager had said to me during one of the meetings, he just said, "Look, I am treating us like we are a standalone company,
Yeah.
and so essentially, everything that we fight for every day, every win that we have, everything that happens inside of this is in our own company. Of course, we're funded by one of the greatest places at the time, and I love that sort of mission, right? But then you could sort of leverage that and pivot it forward, and say, hey, look, all of the people that learned in that environment learned a lot of great entrepreneurship skills. And so that I would definitely tie that back to what you just said as well.
100%. I could not agree more. What you say there has a lot of elements of, I think, what forms not only a successful team or a successful company, but successful leaders. It's the concept of skin in the game. It's the concept of everyone has a role to play. Of being an entity within a larger entity, and thinking of yourselves as a company. Throughout my career, as I rose up to positions of authority, I always made sure that, to the greatest extent possible, that everyone on the team had a stake in the game. And in a lot of cases, what that means is some sort of equity in the company. It's really meaningful, because then, whether it was at GSK or whether it was at Endo or even today, every member of our team here has an equity share in this company, because we ask them to do a lot, right? We ask them to work hard and work long days, and sometimes travel and be up on the weekends and be available for phone calls and video calls late at night. Everybody having a share in the outcome really helps that along. But also, it then lets me go to people and say, look, I expect you to manage your budget like it's your own money, because in fact, it turns out it is your own money, right? So that's an outstanding mentality. I again look back to product management as a place where a lot of people first start learning the craft of leadership, because it's the first time that they have access to, or in some cases, accountability for a P&L. Maybe it's the first time they start to have people report to them. Great training ground, and one that in my industry, if I look around at leaders and executives and CEOs, many, if not all of them, have spent some time kind of in roles just like that early in their career where they can learn that craft and really be tested to see if they've got what it takes to be a leader.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's talk a little bit more about your experience. So you led Onspira Therapeutics until its acquisition by Altavant Sciences. What are some of the most significant milestones and lessons that you learned from that experience?
That was a great experience for me. It was my first private, small, venture-funded biotech company, right? So that's the company that I co-founded with some of my partners after leaving the safety of big publicly traded pharmaceutical companies. I had gotten to the point where the allure and the draw of entrepreneurial biotech medicine had just become too strong, and I stepped out at the right time in my life for me and for my family to give that a try, and with the support of some really great partners around me that had done that many times before. And we founded that company around very interesting technology for a rare disease that really terribly impacts lives of, in that case, patients who have lung transplants, right? I mean, lung transplants are a terrible enough problem to go through. Usually people who have lung transplants have already lived decades of declining health. They're fortunate enough to to have a lung transplant, and then all of a sudden the clock starts ticking, and at the end of 5 or 6 or 7 years they're very likely to be afflicted with a condition called bronchiolitis obliterans. This was a product developed to help extend the lives of those patients much longer by directly treating the inflammation that is happening in the lungs, deeply in the lungs, in this condition. It was a proven biologic, anti-inflammatory biologic product that we reformulated for use as an inhaled nebulized product. Very exciting. Worked really well, and we moved pretty quickly. We funded that company with a small financing round, put a largely virtual team around it, advanced it over the course of 2.5 years or so to validate the concept, get some proof of concept, preclinical, uh, finish the formulation. And we were in the process of going to raise the next financing round, which would have taken the program into the clinic. And lo and behold, we had some unanticipated but quite welcome interest from strategic partners who said, "Look, this program would fit very well into our pipeline. We'd like to license it." And our first answer was, "Well, we're not done with it." But it turned out to be the right thing for the program, for our shareholders. It allowed us to put the program in the hands of a well-funded team in place to take it on the next lap of its journey. And from the perspective of our shareholders, when the product ultimately is successful, we will all be successful as well. But we were able to then step back, put the baby in the hands of somebody else, and then say, okay, well, what do we want to do next? So, once in a while, I mean, that's what this business is about. You always have to be open-minded and not get locked into a strategic path. Sometimes there's an opportunity that turns out to be the right thing for the person, the program, the shareholders at that moment, and you have to be, sort of agile enough or nimble enough to take it. So that's what we did.
So we oftentimes talk a lot about boards and the decisions that are made at the board level as well in the podcast here. And so I'm just curious if you look back on that decision, were there, I would imagine that there were differing perspectives that different people had, in terms of what you should do as a next step. Um, was the board a strong supporter of going the direction that you were going? And then also, were there other voices, maybe your own, saying, well, hang on a minute, because this could actually be, something that we could do, something great with?
Again, I was very fortunate, as I am now, to have a small and very supportive board, right? So, that is such an important dimension of this business, is to have a board that's aligned and that is open-minded enough to make the right decisions on behalf of the program and the investors. And in this case, it was pretty easy. We all had to get over that initial hurdle because it is a little bit like giving up your baby, right? So the first step is the reverse diligence back on the potential acquirer, and we had a couple in the mix that we were fortunate enough to be able to choose from, and we chose a very good partner. But, there's always the discussion around, well, let's step back for a minute.